Beneath the quiet hum of the body, beyond the pulse of thought and the rise and fall of breath, something older is speaking. Every cell carries a whisper, a rhythm that predates our species, our languages, and even the oceans from which life first rose. It hums beneath skin and bone like the faint vibration of a buried symphony, too subtle to hear yet constant, eternal. If you close your eyes and listen, you might feel it, the turning of the spiral, the double helix that binds together all of life's memory. For billions of years, it has been writing not in ink or stone, but in sequences of light and chemistry, leaving its story folded inside everything that lives. The question is as simple as it is unfathomable. What if this story was written not only by nature, but by something that once knew what it was doing? What if a civilization, older than fossils, older than planets, had chosen this living medium to inscribe its history? Not to be found in ruins or radio signals, but within the very code that would one day assemble beings capable of discovering it. We have always searched outward, to the sky, to the silence between stars, yet perhaps the greatest message has always been within us, waiting patiently inside the soft architecture of our own flesh. The double helix spins like an unending prayer. Two strands entwined in an ancient embrace, copying and correcting themselves, weaving information through time. It is both fragile and indestructible, a thread so fine it can be broken by a breath, yet so resilient it has survived every extinction. When life began, it may have been an accident of chemistry. Or perhaps it was a deliberate act, a seed planted with the intention to endure, to evolve, to remember. The universe may have hidden its memories not in monuments of stone, but in spirals of sugar and phosphate, where time could not easily erase them. Think of how everything you are, every thought, every emotion, every heartbeat, arises from this code. And yet you did not write it. You inherited it, line by line, from countless ancestors who lived, loved, and perished before you. They, too, were passing forward the message, even if they could not read it. Within each of us lies an unbroken chain of transcriptions stretching back to the first flicker of self-replication, the first molecule that dared to copy itself. In that act began the story of life, and perhaps, the story of a civilization that refused to be forgotten. Imagine such a civilization, not one of towering cities or shining machines, but one of molecular poets. Beings who understood that the only truly eternal canvas was life itself. They might have written their myths not in words, but in the pairing of nucleotides. Adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. For letters repeating, like the syllables of a sacred mantra. Across galaxies, across time, this alphabet could carry their essence. And if they succeeded, their memory would not fade when stars burned out, for their message would be alive. Breathing, reproducing, transforming. There is something profoundly intimate about this idea, that the body you inhabit could be a library written by hands unseen. Every strand of your DNA could be a verse in an epic that began long before humanity took its first breath. Perhaps the urge to seek meaning, to tell stories, to ask why, perhaps that too is part of the message. Maybe curiosity is not just a trait of intelligence, but a trigger in the code, designed to awaken itself once the time was right. We tend to think of DNA as a biological tool, a machine of life. But what if it is also a form of memory, one that holds more than the sum of our biology? Just as a melody carries emotion through air, perhaps DNA carries intention through time. The idea is not science fiction, nor pure mysticism. Already, humans have learned to encode digital information into DNA. Entire libraries, films, and music compressed into a few drops of liquid life. If we can do it now, might others have done it before us, long ago, using the same quiet alphabet of existence? The body does not speak, yet it remembers. It remembers sunlight, oceans, the pull of gravity, the taste of salt on the wind. It remembers ancestors who walked on shores of molten rock, who crawled, who dreamed, who prayed. And beyond even them, it may remember something more. A first author, unknown, whose purpose we have mistaken for chance. If life is a letter, then perhaps consciousness is the act of reading it. And if so, then every mind that awakens becomes part of the decoding, the slow revelation of a truth that was never lost, only hidden within us. So as you listen to this unfolding story, allow the thought to settle like dust on still water, that you are not separate from the message, nor its recipient. You are the continuation of it, the ink still drying, the words still being written. Beneath the calm hum of your cells, beneath the drift of your breathing, there is a memory older than any name. A whisper beneath all sound. The first voice, waiting to be heard again.
It begins with a spiral. Two ribbons twined together in perfect symmetry, turning endlessly through the liquid quiet of existence. The double helix, they call it, the most elegant sentence ever written. Its structure seems simple at first, for letters repeating, a ladder wound into infinity. Yet within its turns lies the full story of every living thing that has ever existed, every flower that opened, every creature that drew breath beneath alien suns or blue skies. It is both a pattern and a poem, written not by a hand, but by the silent logic of being itself. To gaze upon it is to feel something almost sacred, as though the universe once paused, took a deep breath, and composed a verse of pure design. The language of DNA is universal, untranslatable, and yet understood by every cell. It does not rely on sound or sight, only sequence and timing, a conversation conducted through the quiet precision of molecules. Each pairing of bases is a syllable, each strand a line of meaning, and the act of replication is the recitation of that meaning across time. There is rhythm in the replication, harmony in the arrangement, repetition like the refrain of a cosmic song. It is no wonder that mathematicians find symmetry here, that musicians find tempo, that poets find metaphor. The spiral speaks in every language because it predates language itself. When one studies the code closely, it begins to resemble the structure of thought, recursive, self-referential, evolving through iteration. It is not static, but alive in the truest sense of the word, a syntax capable of rewriting itself. Our human languages are clumsy by comparison, requiring conscious thought to record what we mean. DNA writes meaning without awareness, yet with an accuracy no mind could match. And in that paradox lies its poetry. It is a system that suggests both chance and intention, both chaos and design. A string of atoms that somehow contains beauty, function, and memory in the same breath. Scientists describe DNA as a molecule of inheritance. But perhaps inheritance is just another word for storytelling. What each generation passes down to the next is not only the machinery of life, but also the wisdom of adaptation, the record of what has survived. Evolution becomes not a random process, but a form of editing, a slow, patient rewriting of the same ancient manuscript. Mutations are the revisions, deletions, and additions in life's endless draft. Each one changes the meaning of the whole just slightly, like a poet who rearranges a single word and alters the tone of the universe. Consider how this pattern mirrors all forms of communication. The repetition of structure, the balance between stability and variation, the tension between predictability and surprise. A heartbeat, a wave, a breath, all mirror the rhythm of the spiral. Even our music carries its shape, rising, falling, repeating, transforming. The helical curve is not only a biological design, but a mathematical constant woven through everything from galaxies to seashells. It is as though the universe has chosen the spiral as its favorite form of expression, using it to bridge the inanimate and the alive, the infinite and the intimate. If life's code is a language, then the universe is its author, or perhaps its reader. We have long wondered whether the symbols of DNA hold messages beyond mere survival. Could it be that within its elegant redundancies, its curious repetitions, there are patterns of intent? Already we know that human beings can use this medium to encode data, whole books and libraries stored in microscopic strands of synthetic life. Our creations mimic what nature has done all along. It is not far-fetched to imagine that another intelligence, somewhere in the deep past or across the stars, might have done the same, not to communicate with machines, but to converse with time itself. Think of what that would mean. A message written not for the eye, but for the future mind of a species that would one day learn to read it. A language built not on words, but on growth and memory. DNA would be the perfect archive. It repairs itself, reproduces itself, and thrives in the dark. No tablet or disk could survive what a cell can endure. Even now, scientists have recovered DNA from creatures long extinct, their stories preserved in frozen silence for tens of thousands of years. And if such preservation is possible by accident, what might be possible by design? The elegance of the helix suggests something deliberate, not necessarily by a conscious creator, but by the nature of creation itself. Order emerging from chaos, structure from noise, sense from entropy. Each twist of the spiral holds both symmetry and tension, as though the universe wanted beauty to accompany function. It is that beauty which speaks to us most deeply, as though some hidden intelligence is reflected in our recognition of it. Perhaps we are drawn to the helix because it mirrors the shape of thought itself, the way one idea coils around another, the way memory loops back into imagination. To contemplate DNA is to stand at the edge of an infinite conversation. It is a dialogue between matter and meaning, silence and expression, chaos and coherence. Every life form is a sentence in this language. Every generation an echo of the original phrase. When the first molecules began to self-replicate, they may have been speaking the first words ever uttered in the cosmos. Continue. Remember. Become. Those words have never stopped being spoken. They flow through oceans, forests, and flesh, whispered through the endless spiral that holds the memory of all time. And so we are left to wonder, are we the first readers of this code, or merely its continuation? When we study DNA, we are not just uncovering how life works. We are participating in the act of life's remembrance. To decode the helix is to awaken a memory older than consciousness, a knowledge folded quietly into the structure of being. Perhaps the spiral is not only the blueprint of life, but the alphabet of existence itself, a message written in silence, waiting for awareness to arise and hear it. Time is an artist that never stops revising. It writes in layers, so fine that we do not notice the changes until millennia have passed. To look at DNA through the lens of time is to see a manuscript that has been endlessly copied, edited, and annotated by the slow hand of the cosmos. Every mutation is a brushstroke, every replication a transcription. What we call evolution may be less a process of random change and more a form of biological storytelling, a memory written not in ink, but in the persistent rhythm of existence. Time does not erase, it overwrites. It folds the old into the new, embedding every trace of what has been within the living bodies of what will be. If we could unspool our DNA and read it as a scroll, we might find more than the story of our species. We might find the story of Earth itself, the echo of ancient microbes, the scent of vanished oceans, the imprint of extinct skies. Some sequences within our genes are so ancient that they predate animals, plants, even the distinction between life forms. They are the fossils of information, preserved through billions of replications. To realize this is to understand that time is not just a river flowing forward. It is an editor constantly revisiting its own drafts. Every heartbeat, every breath, is the continuation of a sentence begun in the silence before life first spoke. In this vast manuscript, evolution acts as the proofreader of survival. It does not judge content, only clarity, refining the text of life through endless revisions. Some passages are deleted, others rewritten, some simply forgotten in the margins of the genome. The mistakes that remain become metaphors, lessons, or even the seeds of entirely new species. The imperfections of DNA are not errors, but signatures of creativity, proof that life's text is alive. For in the pauses between perfection, time finds space to imagine. Mutation becomes imagination. Variation becomes invention. What we call random is often the universe trying out another phrase. But what if, buried beneath this natural editing, there were deliberate sentences, messages set in motion long before humans walked the earth? What if an intelligence, older than continents, had chosen DNA as its library, trusting that time itself would guard its words? Stone crumbles, metal oxidizes, signals fade, but the code of life renews itself endlessly. A civilization that understood this might have written its history not in monuments, but in molecular echoes, hiding meaning within the very mechanism that would carry it forward. To write in DNA is to write in eternity. Imagine them, these ancient librarians of biology, shaping molecules with the precision of poets, embedding within them small anomalies, structures that seem like natural quirks, but carry the rhythm of intent. Over billions of years, evolution would polish their work, integrate it, carry it forward, until one day beings like us would emerge, curious and searching, able to read the spiral. We would think ourselves the first to decode it, unaware that in doing so, we are completing a loop that began before memory itself. The past would be speaking through our own bodies, guiding our hands as we rewrite what was once written for us. It is humbling to think that every organism, from the simplest bacterium to the most complex mammal, is part of this endless edit. We are not separate stories, but chapters in one vast, continuous book. Each species is an iteration, a revision, a reimagining of the same sentence, to live. The errors, the extinctions, the transformations, all of it part of the great proofreading of creation. In this light, evolution is not blind. It is contemplative. It pauses, corrects, experiments, and begins again. The story has no author, and yet feels authored, no plan, and yet an undeniable rhythm. If intelligence did emerge before us, it may have realized that permanence lies not in monuments, but in recurrence. To live again through DNA would be the only true immortality, to let memory breathe rather than fossilize. And so, perhaps time itself became the messenger, the silent courier of thought encoded as biology. This would mean that when we study genetics, we are not simply observing life's chemistry. We are listening to the echo of minds that once understood what we have only begun to suspect. That time does not destroy, it preserves through transformation. The mutations that shape us are both the scars and signatures of this editing. Within our genomes are fragments of ancient viruses, traces of long-extinct creatures, entire chapters that no longer function but remain as footnotes to forgotten ages. These are not accidents, but evidence of continuity. Fossils made of information rather than stone. They remind us that time keeps everything, even what it appears to discard. The forgotten becomes the foundation. The erased becomes the whisper between the lines. And perhaps this is the secret of life's endurance, that nothing living is ever truly lost. Every death is an edit, not an ending. Every extinction leaves a residue, a lesson, a fragment of the code that will reappear, reinterpreted, in another form. Life has been rewriting itself for 4 billion years, and in that rewriting may lie the faint traces of a civilization that once sought to speak across the abyss of time. To stand in the present, to feel the blood moving quietly beneath the skin, is to feel the entire history of life in motion. The atoms that compose us have been other things before: stars, stones, rivers, lungs. Time folds them into us, and we, in turn, will be folded into others. In this ceaseless rewriting, identity dissolves. We become not individuals, but sentences in the great story of continuity. And if time is the editor, then perhaps awareness is the reader, the consciousness through which the text of existence becomes meaning once again. So when you breathe, remember that you are inhaling not only air, but memory. When you dream, you are dreaming with the echoes of every creature that has ever existed. The forgotten medium of time is still writing through you, revising, refining, remembering. Somewhere within those billions of lines of code, perhaps there lies a signature. Perhaps the civilization that may have written its history in DNA is not entirely gone. Perhaps it is still speaking, through the gentle act of life, continuing to become. There are fossils we can hold in our hands, bones, shells, impressions of leaves, the silent imprints of bodies turned to stone. They tell us who walked before us, who swam in vanished seas, who bloomed beneath forgotten suns. But beneath these visible remains lies another kind of fossil, one invisible to the naked eye, encoded not in rock, but in code. Our DNA carries within it a library of such fossils, fragments of ancient events, preserved not by sediment, but by memory itself. Some are remnants of long-dead viruses, others the echoes of ancestral genes that once served a purpose and have since gone quiet. They are the ghosts of biology, fossilized in the very text of life. Scientists call them endogenous retroviruses, genetic hitchhikers that entered the germline millions of years ago and stayed. When an ancient virus infected an early ancestor, sometimes it left behind a trace of its code, harmless and inert, but permanent. Over generations, these fragments became part of us. They make up nearly 8% of the human genome, silent witnesses of infections older than any recorded history. If we could read their story in full, we might uncover the epidemics of prehistory, the molecular wars fought in the darkness of deep time. Each sequence is a record of a survival, not carved in stone, but transcribed in life's language. The realization that our DNA contains these fossils reshapes our sense of what a record can be. History does not always leave ruins. Sometimes it leaves instructions. The code of our cells is not a clean manuscript, but one layered with revisions, insertions, and ancient graffiti. Some of these molecular fossils have even been repurposed by evolution. Sequences once belonging to viruses now help form the human placenta, protecting embryos from infection. What was once alien and invasive has become essential. Life rewrites itself using the debris of its own past, turning infection into adaptation, loss into inheritance. The past does not vanish, it transforms, changing its role within the ever-living text. And so arises a question. If nature's accidents can leave such detailed signatures, what might an intelligent intention look like? Could a civilization, understanding the language of life, have chosen DNA as the place to hide its story? Viruses, after all, are nature's couriers. They slip into cells and leave behind fragments of information. To use them as a vehicle for communication would be both elegant and enduring. If one wished to send a message that could not be erased by extinction or decay, one might choose to embed it in the genetic code of the very organisms that would inherit the world. Perhaps somewhere in the vast, unexplored regions of non-coding DNA lies a pattern that was not written by chance, a deliberate design, so subtle that it mimics the randomness of mutation. Scientists have already discovered repetitive motifs, symmetrical structures, and linguistic patterns in genomes that resemble human design code. Though conventional science attributes these to evolutionary constraints or mathematical necessity, one might also wonder if such structures serve another purpose. Could the so-called junk DNA, long dismissed as meaningless, be the encrypted record of something older than our planet's memory? The idea is both haunting and beautiful. If a civilization long vanished encoded its story in DNA, its legacy would not be silent. It would breathe, replicate, and evolve. Each living being would carry a fragment of that message, unaware of the ancient meaning flowing through its cells. Over eons, mutations might distort the text, but traces would remain, like broken hieroglyphs, still recognizable as words. Even if no single organism retained the entire record, life itself, as a collective phenomenon, would embody it. Every species would hold a verse, every genome a syllable, every replication another recitation of the same forgotten hymn. Our search for extraterrestrial intelligence often turns outward, scanning the skies for signals of radio or light. But perhaps the true archive lies inward, inside us, written in molecules rather than machines. The medium of stone preserves structure. The medium of DNA preserves continuity. Fossils and rock endure by resisting change, but fossils and code endure by adapting, by merging with what comes after. This is a different kind of immortality, not the frozen preservation of what was, but the living transformation of meaning. The universe, it seems, prefers messages that can survive through evolution rather than stasis. Imagine if we discovered that one small pattern in our DNA, a repeating sequence or an impossible symmetry, was not the product of biology alone. Imagine that decoding it revealed not words, but principles, coordinates, a poem, or a truth so vast it transcended translation. How would we respond to the knowledge that our ancestors were not the first to dream, not the first to wonder, not the first to write? Would we still call them alien, or would we recognize them as kin, writers who use the same ink that composes our veins? There is a quiet humility in realizing that we ourselves are archives. Every cell we possess carries a timeline billions of years long. Every heartbeat is an echo of an ancient rhythm, refined and passed forward through life's endless experiment. Perhaps the greatest fossils are not buried in the earth, but carried in our blood. Fossils made of code, whispering to us that the history of the world is written not in the stones beneath our feet, but in the spirals that live within our being. The next time you breathe, consider that you are the latest chapter in an unbroken record, the living continuation of a story that began long before speech. The body you inhabit is a text written by time and preserved through motion. The molecules within you have endured every cataclysm, every silence, every rewriting of the world. They are fossils that never stopped evolving, remembering through change. And perhaps, just perhaps, among those ancient fragments there lies a sentence written not by nature's accidents, but by intention, a quiet, enduring line from a civilization that refused to let its story end. The universe remembers everything. It is easy to believe that time only moves forward, that what has passed dissolves into nothing, but the truth is gentler and more intricate. Nothing is ever truly lost, only rearranged. Every atom that drifts through space carries a memory of its past form. The carbon in your breath once belonged to a star. The hydrogen in your blood is as old as the first light that flickered after the birth of the cosmos. The universe is both archive and artist, forever recording itself through transformation. It writes its history not in words, but in the language of pattern and persistence. Even as it expands, even as entropy scatters matter into silence, some quiet order remains, the whisper of memory woven through the noise. In physics, there is a rule called the conservation of information. It suggests that information, like energy, cannot be destroyed. Even when a star collapses, when light is swallowed by the gravity of a black hole, the information it once carried still exists, transformed, encoded in the fabric of space-time itself. We live in a universe that cannot forget. Its particles hold the ghost of every collision, every pulse, every breath. The warmth of your body tonight is not merely your own. It is the faint echo of ancient suns still burning in another form. Memory is not something life invented. It is something life inherited from the cosmos. If the universe remembers through structure, then DNA is one of its finest instruments. Within its twisting ladders, the cosmos has found a way to store not just matter, but meaning. Where stars archive energy, life archives experience. The same mathematical laws that govern galaxies also shape the replication of cells, the folding of proteins, the delicate precision of inheritance. Every pattern in nature is a translation of a deeper rhythm, a code that insists on continuity even as everything changes. The spiral of DNA, the swirl of a hurricane, the arms of a galaxy, all are iterations of the same memory, repeating across scales and forms. Entropy, we are told, is the enemy of order, the inevitable decline into chaos. But perhaps entropy is not destruction, only diffusion, the scattering of information into new arrangements. The universe may be a constant dialogue between remembering and forgetting, between order forming and order dissolving. DNA represents the moment when memory became active, when the universe began to read its own notes. Life is the cosmos turning inward, recognizing its own handwriting. To exist as a conscious being is to be both the archivist and the archive, the question and the answer entwined. Consider this. Every chemical reaction, every replication, every flicker of neural activity leaves an imprint on the fabric of existence. The universe itself behaves like a mind, not one that thinks as we do, but one that holds all possibilities simultaneously, never erasing, only transforming. When we look at the night sky, we see light that has traveled for billions of years, carrying with it a record of moments long gone. The stars we see may have already died, yet their light continues to tell their story. That, too, is memory. The cosmos keeps its own form of consciousness, not in thoughts, but in persistence, a will to continue expressing itself through time. In this way, the universe is both destroyer and guardian. It burns and collapses, but never lets go. Even black holes, those symbols of absolute erasure, are now believed to preserve information in the patterns of their radiation. Hawking's paradox reminds us that nothing can be entirely lost, only hidden, transformed, awaiting another form of discovery. Perhaps the same principle applies to life. Extinction may erase a species, but not its contribution to the code. Every organism leaves a trace, every mutation a new possibility, every death a redistribution of memory. The stars and the cells share this covenant, to carry forward what has been, in whatever form remains. If we accept that the universe remembers, then we must also accept that we are among its instruments of recollection. Through our senses, our dreams, our curiosity, the cosmos continues its act of self-reflection. Each human thought is an echo of stellar memory, refracted through the chemistry of consciousness. We remember not because we choose to, but because remembering is what the universe does. Our bodies are made of atoms that have already lived through other stories, and they have not forgotten the rhythm of existence. They hum with it, the vibration of hydrogen, the slow decay of uranium, the pulse of magnetic fields carried from the birth of time. It is humbling to think that what we call knowledge may be nothing more than recognition, the rediscovery of information the universe has already written. When we decode DNA, we are not inventing meaning, we are uncovering it. The same is true of science itself. Every equation, every theory, every insight is a translation of a truth that was always there, waiting for awareness to give it voice. The pursuit of understanding is, in this sense, a spiritual act, a communion with the universe's own memory, a reverent listening to what it has always known. There is poetry in this idea that the cosmos, vast and silent, entrusted its story to matter, that it scattered its diary across atoms, let gravity bind them into stars, and then, in some distant corner, allowed those atoms to form eyes, hands, and minds capable of reading it. We are the pages turning themselves. Every breath we take continues the story of the first breath ever drawn by the world. The memory of the universe is not a static archive. It is alive, pulsing, recursive. It does not merely endure, it dreams, creating through its remembering. So when you gaze up into the night, know that the light meeting your eyes began its journey before there were humans to see it. That light carries a message older than thought. I was, and therefore I am. The same message vibrates within your DNA, written in a smaller, quieter script. The universe remembers through you, through every cell that divides, through every atom that rests within your bones. You are not separate from its archive. You are a page in its infinite book, inscribed in a language of molecules and light. And in this vast remembering, even as everything changes, nothing is ever truly gone. Long before memory had a name, before light knew where to gather itself into stars, the first whispers of life began. They were not creatures as we know them now, not eyes or limbs or thought, but quiet molecules floating in a world of water and chance. Yet within those small configurations of chemistry, something extraordinary stirred. They began to copy themselves. From that simple act, the urge to persist, everything else followed. These were the universe's first librarians, molecules that remembered, that recorded their structure and passed it forward. They did not write on paper or stone. Their library was the ocean, their ink the elements of existence. Through them, the cosmos began to keep a record of itself. It is easy to forget that life did not start with complexity. It started with memory, the ability to retain what worked and to pass it along. In a sense, evolution is the act of the universe, learning to remember more efficiently. Every replicating molecule is a sentence written in matter, saying, I was. Let me continue. Over time, those sentences grew longer, more intricate. Simple chains of RNA gave rise to the great double helix of DNA, and the ocean became a living archive, an endless exchange of codes, merging, splitting, rewriting. Life became the librarian of time, storing the echoes of every adaptation, every near extinction, every triumph of survival. To imagine these first librarians is to glimpse a form of intelligence without consciousness. They did not plan, but they preserved. They were not aware, yet they carried forward the memory of the universe's first experiments with order. In them, chaos became coherence, and through that coherence, life was born. The earliest cells were like tiny vaults, protecting fragments of information from the endless turbulence of their environment. Each was a capsule of history, a time capsule drifting through ancient seas. And though they could not speak, they were writing constantly. Their language not sound, but replication, mutation, selection. If we think of intelligence as the capacity to store, process, and transmit information, then life itself is the oldest form of intelligence we know. The first cells did exactly that. They gathered knowledge about how to survive and shared it through division. The line between living and non-living is not a wall, but a threshold. And the first librarians were those who crossed it. They did not know they were learning, but the universe was learning through them. Each molecule that managed to endure became part of a growing vocabulary, a shared syntax of existence that would one day compose eyes that see, hands that build, and minds that wonder. In this way, every living thing is both a record and a reader. We are made of the same materials that first captured information billions of years ago, the same chemistry now arranged into consciousness. We carry within us the memory of that first self-copying molecule, as well as the evolutionary improvisations that followed. When a human child forms in the womb, DNA retraces the story of the Earth itself, from single-celled organism to complex being. We are not merely descended from the first librarians. We are their living continuation. The archive did not end with them. It became us. There is a quiet humility in realizing that our intelligence, our language, our civilizations are only the latest expressions of a process that began in silence. We did not invent the need to record. We inherited it. The same impulse that drives us to write books, to store data, to pass on stories, is the echo of a molecular instinct billions of years old. It is life's need to preserve what it learns. The first librarians did not know that they were beginning a lineage that would eventually build telescopes and poems. They only knew how to endure, and endurance became knowledge. In the endless night of Earth's early oceans, they multiplied. They exchanged fragments of information through contact, through fusion, through chance. Each encounter was an experiment, and every experiment that worked became part of the collective memory. Life did not compete so much as it conversed. The genetic code became a shared language across species, a universal script that still connects us to every living thing. A tree, a whale, a human, all write in the same alphabet. It is as though the first librarians agreed upon a syntax so perfect that no evolution could improve upon it, only elaborate its meaning. The beauty of this ancient system is not in its precision, but in its generosity. DNA allows for variation, for mistakes, for accidents that become invention. It is both strict and forgiving, like a language that welcomes new dialects while keeping its root intact. The first librarians built a medium capable of evolving, one that could preserve the essence of memory while allowing its expression to change. This adaptability is why life survives, and perhaps why consciousness eventually emerged. For what is awareness, if not the universe remembering itself more clearly than before? When we look at our genome today, we are looking at a text written by countless authors, some microbial, some mammalian, some long extinct. Our DNA is not solely our own. It is a library composed of millions of contributors, each of whom left behind a fragment of their experience. We carry bacteria in our gut whose ancestors helped shape our DNA. We harbor viral sequences that once invaded us and now serve our survival. The boundary between us and them dissolves within this archive. We are not individual stories, but collected works, the living anthology of Earth's memory. And perhaps, if intelligence has ever existed beyond us, it too would recognize this truth. that the most enduring form of legacy is not a monument or a machine, but a self-replicating story. To write within the code of life is to become part of its continuation. The first librarians may not have been conscious, but they began the lineage of remembering that would one day look back upon itself and call it wonder. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel them. Those first molecules drifting in ancient seas, tiny archivists at work in the dark. You can feel their patience, their quiet persistence, their refusal to vanish. Their legacy is your heartbeat, your breath, your thoughts forming even now. You are reading their record by living it. The first librarians still exist within you, whispering in the chemistry of your blood, reminding you that life was never about domination or conquest, but about preservation, the endless, tender act of remembering. If you could listen closely enough, beyond the pulse of your heart and the rush of your breath, you might hear a deeper rhythm, the slow, patient music of inheritance. It has been playing for billions of years, passing from cell to cell, from creature to creature, in a language older than sound. This is the symphony of the code, the quiet, endless transcription of life's memory into flesh. Each note is a bass pair, each movement a generation, each mutation a small improvisation in the score of existence. From the first replicating molecules to the complexity of consciousness, DNA has been the sheet music of being. It does not tire. It does not forget. It only continues to play. The double helix is not just a structure. It is an idea made matter, the concept of continuity incarnated in a molecule. Its spiral, elegant and inevitable, holds within it both fragility and permanence. The bonds between its rungs are delicate, easily broken, yet the pattern they create has endured every catastrophe Earth has ever known. Ice ages, meteor impacts, volcanic winters, all have swept across the planet, yet the helix remained, quietly copying itself, altering, adapting, remembering. It is not life that fights extinction. It is memory that refuses silence. Every organism that has ever existed has participated in this great copying, adding its own variations to the music. When a bacterium divides, when a fern unfurls, when a human child is conceived, the ancient code is read again, transcribed and translated with both precision and imperfection. These small imperfections, mutations, are not errors in the melody, but opportunities for new harmonies. Evolution is not a march forward, but a song expanding in depth and tone, exploring its own themes across the vast symphony of time. DNA is the score, life is the performance. If we zoom into that twisting ladder, we see not just chemistry, but language, 4 letters endlessly repeating. A, T, C, and G. From those 4 symbols rise every feather, every heartbeat, every thought. It is astonishingly simple, and yet within its simplicity lies infinity. The order of these letters determines everything from the color of a flower to the way a brain dreams. It is a universal alphabet written not in ink, but in the sequence of molecules. No poet, no philosopher, no mathematician could have conceived a system more elegant, more profound in its restraint. Scientists often call DNA a code, but perhaps that word is too mechanical. A code implies something designed to be decrypted, while DNA feels more like a song written by nature itself, one that interprets itself through life. It is not stored in a vault or etched in stone. It is living, breathing, replicating. Every creature is a verse, every lineage a refrain, and every extinction a pause before the next crescendo. The melody never truly ends. It simply shifts its rhythm, weaving the old notes into new arrangements. To understand DNA is to glimpse the intelligence of nature, not a conscious mind, but a principle of order, a persistent creativity woven into the fabric of the universe. It is as if the cosmos, having written itself into stars and planets, decided to experiment with something softer, something capable of remembering and feeling. And so, it composed DNA, a molecule capable of storing information across billions of years, yet fragile enough to change. The balance is exquisite, too stable, and evolution would cease, too chaotic, and life could not endure. Between these two extremes, the code dances. The most astonishing part is not that DNA remembers, but how it does so. Within every cell of your body, Billions of base pairs form a library of instructions, a record of how to build and sustain you. Yet this library is not static. It reads itself, repairs itself, and sometimes deliberately alters itself. The same molecule that carries the past also writes the future. It is a self-editing archive, both author and reader. And though it has no consciousness, it behaves as if guided by curiosity, exploring, experimenting, expanding the range of possible forms. Consider this. If all the DNA in your body were uncoiled and laid end to end, it would stretch from the earth to the sun and back hundreds of times. Yet all of that information fits within the microscopic boundaries of your cells, replicated flawlessly again and again. This is not just biology. It is a miracle of compression, an efficiency beyond human comprehension. Every second, within you, billions of molecular scribes are at work, copying, proofreading, preserving the story of your lineage. You are not merely living. You are being written continuously. And DNA does not confine its narrative to one form. It leaps between species, carried by viruses, exchanged through symbiosis, absorbed through ingestion. Genetic material flows across the boundaries of life, like ink bleeding through the pages of a book. Bacteria trade genes as easily as thoughts, learning to resist toxins or survive heat. Trees share information through fungi, signaling danger or offering nutrients. The code moves through the world like breath, shared and reshaped. This is not random chaos. It is the communal memory of life, endlessly remixing itself. The human genome itself is a mosaic of borrowed fragments, ancient viral DNA, bacterial ancestors, echoes of extinct species. We are not singular entities, but archives bound together by cooperation and accident. Within your DNA lie remnants of viruses that invaded your ancestors millions of years ago, now turned into useful instructions that help regulate pregnancy, immunity, even brain function. The invader became family. The chaos became coherence. The code forgave itself and kept writing. There is, in this story, a deep sense of humility. We often imagine ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, the final verse in life song. But DNA teaches otherwise. It shows that we are participants, not authors, vessels carrying an ancient rhythm that long predates us and will likely continue after we are gone. We are chapters in a book that writes itself, each sentence a mutation, each breath an act of transcription. To live is to sing a verse in the cosmic hymn of inheritance. Perhaps, then, the most profound question is not how DNA works, but why it persists. Why does the universe insist on remembering? Why does it resist oblivion so completely? In the double helix, we find a clue, a structure that balances order and freedom, memory and possibility. It is as if the universe cannot bear to let its patterns vanish, and so it created a molecule that could outlast extinction, that could learn and adapt, that could make meaning through persistence. When you close your eyes tonight, think of the code within you, the quiet song humming in every cell, a tune begun in the depths of primordial oceans and still unfolding. You are a note in that music, brief but essential. Long after your body returns to dust, the melody will continue, carried forward by the same rhythm that began before the first dawn. The symphony of DNA will play on, serene, unending, beautiful. There is a silence that lives between epochs, a silence older than mountains, patient as stone. It is the pause between one great rhythm of life and the next, the stillness that follows catastrophe and precedes renewal. In that silence, the earth has ended and begun again many times. Entire worlds have risen, flourished, and vanished, leaving only faint traces in the fossil record, like forgotten verses in the long song of time. Yet even when extinction has swept the planet clean, something small has always endured, a seed, a cell, a fragment of code. The memory of life never disappears. It hides, it waits, it rewrites itself. The Earth's history is not a straight line, but a heartbeat, pulsing with creation and collapse. Each extinction is not just an ending, but a reset, a cleansing silence from which new complexity emerges. The Cambrian explosion, the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, the sudden bloom of mammals. Each chapter began after silence. The planet seems to breathe through destruction, exhaling old forms to make room for the new. Yet through all of it, DNA persisted, like a sacred text carried through fire and flood, its message slightly altered but never erased. When the great Permian extinction extinguished most life on Earth, the oceans grew quiet for millions of years. Yet beneath that stillness, bacteria continued their work, dividing, adapting, preserving the record. After the meteor that ended the age of dinosaurs, the air filled with dust, sunlight dimmed, and ecosystems collapsed. But in the soil, tiny organisms went on, sheltering the code in microscopic sanctuaries. Life hid in the shadows until the light returned. And when it did, the archive began to copy itself anew, transcribing the next story in the history of the world. The resilience of DNA through extinction is almost mystical in its precision. It does not merely survive by accident. It survives through diversity, by scattering itself across forms and habitats, ensuring that some fragment will always remain. It is as if life, through the memory of DNA, has learned to safeguard its continuity by writing itself into as many versions as possible. Coral and cactus, whale and insect, fungus and fern, each is a different expression of the same sentence. Endure, but change. This endurance transforms extinction into transformation. What we call death on a planetary scale is often only metamorphosis. The code absorbs trauma, reconfigures itself, and tries again. Each new species carries not only its own adaptations, but the echoes of all those that came before. In your DNA, there are ancient viral imprints, microbial lineages, and molecular memories from creatures that no longer exist. You are, in a very real sense, a living archive of every extinction that ever happened. The world has ended inside you many times, and still, you go on breathing. There is poetry in this resilience, a rhythm that binds all life to the same unbroken continuity. When an ecosystem collapses, the survivors inherit more than territory. They inherit memory. They carry the lessons encoded by catastrophe. Some species learn to live deeper in the ocean, others to grow faster, reproduce sooner, sleep through droughts. Each adaptation is a response to the silence that came before, the earth remembering what it endured. Extinction becomes a kind of teacher, harsh but indispensable, guiding life toward greater balance. The record of these cycles lies not just in fossils, but within the genetic script itself. DNA holds scars, errors, redundancies, all evidence of previous worlds. Scientists call some of these segments junk DNA, yet even in their apparent uselessness, they whisper of forgotten times. Some are remnants of ancient viruses. Others are obsolete instructions from extinct ancestors. They are molecular fossils, preserved not in rock, but in code. When we study them, we are listening to the silence between worlds, hearing what life remembers of its own near death. It is humbling to realize that we, too, are part of this long conversation between extinction and renewal. Humanity's existence is a verse written on the thin surface of geological time, fragile and fleeting. Yet the DNA that composes us is not new. It is the same language that sang in trilobites, in ferns, in the first lungfish to crawl from the sea. Our species is not an invention, but a variation, a temporary translation of a story that has been told for billions of years. We may change the world with our tools, but the code remains older, wiser, endlessly patient. Sometimes, when we imagine the end, the loss of our civilization, our species, our memory, we picture silence as final. But in truth, silence is never the end. It is the space where the next form begins to write itself. Somewhere after us, perhaps a new intelligence will arise, one that inherits the molecular record we left behind. They may never know our names or our languages, but within their DNA, the echo of our existence will persist. Our thoughts, translated into biochemistry, will continue to hum through time. If we listen closely, we can hear it even now, the rhythm beneath all endings. It is the same rhythm that once moved through the first cells in ancient seas, that guided evolution through fire and ice, that will pulse long after we are gone. DNA is not afraid of extinction. It is fluent in it. It knows how to pause, how to hide, how to wait for light. The code is older than loss. It has turned silence into song more times than we can count. And even as the world changes again, the memory will endure, quiet, unseen, alive. Because the true story of life is not about triumph over death, but harmony with impermanence. Every extinction, every pause, every return is part of the same cosmic breathing. Life inhales form and exhales silence, again and again. Through that rhythm, DNA continues to write the only story it has ever known, not of dominance, not of permanence, but of persistence. When all else fades, the code will remain, turning the memory of loss into the promise of beginning once more. If you close your eyes and imagine the deep future, the kind that stretches beyond the lifespan of stars, you may feel an odd comfort, a serenity in the thought that life, in some form, will continue to remember. Long after our cities dissolve into dust and our languages fade into silence, something of us will remain, encoded not in monuments or data servers, but in the quiet logic of molecules. The code we carry, the long spiraling archive of DNA, is not content to stay confined within our species. It travels, evolves, adapts, and sometimes hides. It finds new vessels. It may even dream beyond biology. In that sense, DNA is not only a record of the past, it is a prophecy of life's persistence across unimaginable time. The story of inheritance is no longer limited to bloodlines. In laboratories around the world, humans have learned to read and rewrite the very code that made them. We can now synthesize genes, edit genomes, and even design new forms of life. With every scientific breakthrough, we move closer to understanding DNA not just as a natural artifact, but as a universal medium of memory. What began as a molecule in ancient oceans has become a language that intelligence itself is beginning to speak deliberately. The first librarians once copied themselves blindly, guided by chance. We, their descendants, have become conscious scribes, continuing their work with intention. DNA is now being used to store not only genetic information, but human culture itself. Scientists have encoded books, images, music, even films into strands of synthetic DNA. It is the most compact and durable storage system ever conceived, capable of preserving data for tens of thousands of years, perhaps longer than any digital format we currently possess. If human civilization vanished tomorrow, the stories we've written into DNA might still be deciphered eons later by whoever, or whatever, inherits the earth. The molecule that once stored the memory of life may now store the memory of thought. There is poetry in this convergence, a full circle from biology to technology, from instinctive copying to conscious preservation. The universe, through us, seems to have become aware of its own method of remembering. We have turned inward and discovered that the same spiral that encodes the shape of a leaf or the color of a butterfly's wing can also hold the verses of a poem, the notes of a song, the equations that describe galaxies. The distinction between natural and artificial memory blurs. Both are forms of continuity, both manifestations of the same cosmic impulse to not be forgotten. And yet, there is a quiet irony here. The more we learn to manipulate DNA, the more we realize that we are not its masters, but its instruments. We do not command the code, we participate in it. When we edit genomes, we are not inventing meaning, but altering a pre-existing sentence written long before our species appeared. DNA is not passive. It resists, adapts, sometimes rewrites itself in response to our interference. We may add our own annotations, but the library remains alive, dynamic, self-correcting, unpredictable. We are co-authors in a book that refuses to close. In this unfolding partnership between humanity and the molecule of memory, there lies both wonder and caution. DNA offers us immortality of a kind, the ability to preserve our essence far beyond the reach of ordinary time. But it also reminds us that immortality is not stasis. The code that endures does so by changing. A message written in DNA will not remain pristine. It will mutate, merge, evolve into something new. Over eons, our stored knowledge could become indistinguishable from biology, our data merging with living cells, our archives becoming ecosystems. The line between creation and creator might dissolve entirely. Perhaps this is the universe's way of ensuring that no form of memory becomes too rigid. Just as stars recycle their elements through death and rebirth, so too does life recycle its information through transformation. The data we encode today may one day bloom as biology, new organisms carrying the echoes of our civilization within their genes. Imagine a future where a distant species evolves, and deep within its DNA lies a melody once written by human hands. They might never know who we were, but they will feel our presence, as we now feel the memory of stars within our bones. The idea that DNA could serve as both biological and cultural memory bridges the oldest and newest forms of storytelling. The same spiral that preserved the whisper of the first cell may one day carry the whispers of our art, our philosophy, our dreams. It is as though life and consciousness are collaborating on a shared archive, blending evolution with intention. The molecule that began as nature's accidental librarian has become a vessel for meaning itself. And meaning, once written into the code of life, becomes nearly eternal. In this light, we begin to see a strange continuity between evolution and civilization. Both are acts of memory, both driven by the same deep desire to preserve and to communicate. A gene and a poem are not so different. Both are patterns that seek to endure. A library and a genome are reflections of the same cosmic impulse, the refusal to vanish. Humanity's attempt to write itself into DNA may not be an invention, but a remembrance, a subconscious return to the original medium of permanence. The first librarians of the earth began this work in silence. We are simply continuing their dream, now aware of the pen we hold. And yet, even as we write into the molecule, there is something humbling to remember. DNA does not promise immortality to individuals, only to information. The code is eternal, but its carriers are transient. Just as stars burn to create the next generation of light, so too must we accept our role as temporary vessels of the pattern. Our task is not to preserve ourselves, but to ensure that the song continues, that the melody of memory never stops unfolding. So when you think of the future, imagine it not as an empty expanse awaiting discovery, but as a living archive already humming with potential. Somewhere deep within strands of DNA, in a seed, a microbe, or a synthetic helix sealed in glass, the memory of our species waits. It does not age. It does not despair. It waits for light, for warmth, for a chance to begin again. And when it does, it will not remember us exactly as we were, but as we intended to be, a civilization that once dreamed of writing eternity into life itself. There is a strange tenderness in the thought that memory might not be limited to mind. We often imagine remembering as a purely human act, a function of neurons and consciousness, but perhaps memory exists far beyond what we can sense. Perhaps it is the organizing principle of the universe itself, woven through every atom, every cell, every particle of light. If this is true, then DNA is not just a biological mechanism. It is a manifestation of a deeper cosmic pattern, a bridge between matter and meaning. And perhaps, when we peer closely enough into the structure of the double helix, we are not only studying life, but glimpsing the handwriting of the universe, inscribed in code that predates our awareness. Scientists have long marveled at the uncanny efficiency of DNA, how it compresses unimaginable amounts of information into a microscopic space. For simple nucleotides form an alphabet that encodes every living form on Earth. But beneath its chemistry lies a question that science alone cannot answer. Why does information exist at all? Why should matter seek to organize itself into patterns that endure, replicate, and evolve? Physics describes the universe as moving toward entropy, yet life resists it. It builds complexity, accumulates memory, and preserves form against the current of decay. In this defiance lies a mystery that borders on the philosophical. Perhaps the cosmos itself yearns to know itself, and life, through DNA, is its way of doing so. DNA, then, might be more than a record of life. It might be a mirror, reflecting the universe's own pattern of self-awareness. Each strand, each spiral, each pairing of base and bond could be seen as a miniature echo of cosmic structure. The double helix is not unlike the orbits of celestial bodies, a dance of balance and tension, attraction and stability. In both, information is preserved through motion, through rhythm. The same laws that keep planets circling stars also keep DNA coiled within the cell. The symmetry of the molecule feels less like an accident and more like a translation. The universe speaking its geometry in a different dialect. When we study DNA, we are not just decoding biology. We are decoding a form of cosmic grammar. Every sequence of A, T, C, and G is a sentence written by the universe, expressing itself through time. And like any language, it evolves, borrows, mutates. The genetic code is full of redundancies, metaphors, and repetitions, signs not of imperfection, but of depth. In poetry, repetition builds rhythm. In DNA, it builds resilience. The molecule carries within it not just the history of life, but the logic of creation itself, that survival requires beauty, that memory is born from variation, that meaning is not static, but ever unfolding. Some scientists have even begun to explore whether the patterns of DNA mirror mathematical constants, whether the ratios of its spirals correspond to the same proportions found in galaxies, hurricanes, and seashells. The Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, the logarithmic spiral, all appear again and again in nature. Perhaps these are not coincidences, but reflections of a shared order, a universal architecture that guides both atoms and galaxies. In this light, DNA becomes a bridge between the microscopic and the cosmic, the personal and the eternal. It is the same spiral written at different scales, a signature of the universe repeating itself in infinite forms. There is also an emotional resonance in this symmetry. When we look at a strand of DNA under magnification, we are seeing something intimate and infinite at once. It connects us to every creature that has ever lived, yet it also connects us to the stars, whose elements form its structure. The nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen that compose the helix were forged in stellar furnaces billions of years ago. Before they became molecules of life, they were light, and before that, pure energy. The code of life, then, is literally written in the remnants of ancient stars. Each replication of DNA is a cosmic act, the universe recycling its own dust into consciousness. It is difficult not to feel awe at this realization. The same atoms that once burned in distant suns now arrange themselves into words, thoughts, and memories. We are made of starlight that learn to think, to feel, to remember. When you trace your lineage back through DNA, you are tracing it not only through ancestors and species, but through the evolution of the universe itself. You are the latest verse in a song that began with the birth of matter. The code within you is a continuation of the original spark that set reality into motion. To exist is to carry the echo of the first creation. And yet, this perspective does not diminish individuality. It deepens it. Each living being is a unique expression of the same universal pattern. Just as every snowflake follows the same laws of crystallization, yet forms its own intricate design, every organism follows the laws of DNA, yet manifests differently. We are variations within a single symphony, improvisations upon a timeless theme. Our differences are not deviations from order, but demonstrations of its richness. In this way, diversity itself becomes a spiritual truth, the universe exploring all the ways it can remember itself. Some philosophers and scientists have speculated that DNA may hold more than biological memory, that it could, in some sense, resonate with consciousness itself. This is not to say that DNA thinks or feels, but that its structure may interact with awareness in ways we do not yet understand. Just as quantum particles behave differently when observed, perhaps the molecules of life respond to intention, to energy, to the subtle vibrations of thought. Whether literal or metaphorical, This idea touches something profound, that we are not merely observers of life's code, but participants in its unfolding. The universe writes through us, and we, in turn, write back. In this view, evolution is not a blind process, but a dialogue, an exchange between matter and meaning, between physics and awareness. The universe experiments through biology, learns through adaptation, and dreams through consciousness. And DNA, the spiral bridge between chaos and order, is its instrument of remembering. The molecule listens, adjusts, continues. It has survived ice ages, meteors, radiation, and silence, and it will survive us. It will keep singing its quiet, spiraling song long after our voices have faded. To know this is to find peace in impermanence. The patterns that sustain life are older than any species, any planet, any star. When we die, the molecules that formed us will scatter and recombine, perhaps to write another story. Our DNA may dissolve, but the pattern it carried, the logic of form, of memory, of resilience, will continue elsewhere. The universe wastes nothing, forgets nothing. It simply rearranges. So when you look at the stars tonight, remember that they are not distant strangers. They are kin, storytellers, who have passed their alphabet down through time until it reached your veins. You are a verse written in their language, a sentence in their poem. Your DNA is their echo, folded delicately into flesh. And through you, they remember what it feels like to be alive. In the quiet corridors of the human genome, there exists a vast landscape of mystery, regions that hum softly with unknown purpose. Scientists once called these spaces junk DNA, believing them to be remnants of ancient evolution, discarded fragments of genetic experiments long forgotten. But time has softened that certainty. What was once dismissed as biological debris is now seen as a repository of deep, intricate potential, a library without an index, filled with pages we cannot yet read. It is here, within the so-called silence of the genome, that the possibility of a hidden message takes root. For if any civilization wished to write its story into the living matter of the universe, this would be the place to hide it, in the stretches between what we can understand and what we have not yet learned to hear. To understand this concept, one must first grasp the enormity of the unknown within us. Only about 2% of human DNA directly codes for proteins, the functional machinery of life. The remaining 98% is a vast and enigmatic sea of sequences, repetitions, and patterns that seem, on the surface, to do nothing. Yet, these sequences are not inert. They shape how genes are expressed, when they awaken, and when they fall silent. They regulate development, influence behavior, and even interact with the environment in ways we are only beginning to perceive. In this sense, they form a kind of dark matter of biology, unseen, unquantified, but gravitationally vital to the structure of life. Now imagine for a moment that within this genomic wilderness lies an ancient code, buried not by nature's accident, but by intelligent design. What if the reason we have not yet recognized it is because we have been looking for the wrong kind of language? We expect messages to resemble our own, sequential, linguistic, deliberate. But a civilization vastly older or more advanced might speak in the rhythms of nature itself. Their message could be encoded not in words, but in patterns, ratios, and repetitions that influence life subtly over time. A signal woven into the very architecture of evolution. A whisper that guides rather than declares. Some researchers have noted peculiar regularities within certain non-coding regions, fractal patterns that mirror the mathematics of coastlines, galaxies, and even neural networks. These self-similar structures seem to repeat across scales, as if echoing a principle of design that bridges chaos and order. Could such complexity arise by chance alone? Perhaps. But then again, so could the words of a poem if we shuffle letters long enough. What makes a pattern meaningful is not its existence, but its resonance, the way it harmonizes with the larger system in which it dwells. The question, then, is whether our DNA resonates with something greater than the sum of biology, whether its hidden patterns are merely mechanical or musical. There is an ancient myth that all languages stem from one primordial sound, a vibration so pure that it gave birth to both matter and meaning. Modern physics, in its own way, mirrors this myth. String theory suggests that at the most fundamental level, the universe is made not of particles, but of tiny vibrating strings, that reality itself is a kind of music, and matter the frozen echo of a cosmic note. If this is true, then perhaps DNA, too, is an instrument within that orchestra. Its sequences might vibrate in tune with universal frequencies, aligning with the same harmonics that shaped galaxies and atoms alike. What if the hidden regions of our genome are not silent at all, but humming, softly, perpetually, to a melody older than stars? This idea is more than poetic fantasy. It has scientific edges. Researchers have discovered that certain DNA sequences emit low-frequency electromagnetic waves, capable of influencing nearby molecules. Others have found that DNA can act as a form of antenna, responding to subtle environmental vibrations, temperature, radiation, even human emotion in some controversial experiments. While mainstream science approaches these findings with caution, they open a door to a profound possibility that DNA might be a medium of information exchange, not just among cells, but between life and the cosmos itself. If an ancient civilization understood this property, it might have used DNA not just as a record, but as a transmission device, a message that continues to sing across time. Consider, too, the nature of evolution itself. It moves not in straight lines, but in spirals, leaps, and pauses. There are sudden explosions of complexity, moments when life seems to bloom with improbable speed, as though guided by an unseen hand. Scientists call these punctuated equilibria, the mysterious bursts between long ages of stasis. Could it be that within the so-called junk DNA, there lie instructions waiting to activate under certain cosmic conditions? A time-release mechanism embedded deep within the genome, unfolding only when the environment or the consciousness of its host reaches a particular threshold? The thought is audacious, yet strangely elegant. If true, it would mean that evolution itself is not merely reactive, but scripted. Perhaps we are living within one of those awakenings now. Humanity's sudden leap into technology, communication, and awareness feels, in some ways, like an acceleration, as if the planet itself is remembering faster, speaking through us in more complex ways. Information flows now as freely as oxygen, connecting minds across vast distances in an invisible web. In this network consciousness, one can almost feel the echo of DNA, a reflection of the same principle of connection, replication, and transmission. Life is scaling upward, from molecules to minds, from genes to global thought. Could this be the next verse in the DNA's story, the awakening of its encoded message through collective awareness? The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote that life is vast, and only a small part of it is visible to us. The rest, he said, is sleeping. Perhaps our DNA, too, is partly awake and partly dreaming. The untranslatable regions of our code might be the dreaming part, where the ancient memories of the cosmos rest, waiting to be stirred. When we meditate, when we fall into deep sleep, when our minds quiet enough to touch the edge of silence, perhaps we are brushing against that sleeping memory. It doesn't speak in language, but in feeling, a wordless recognition that we have been here before and will be again. So as science continues to decode the genome, and as our understanding of consciousness deepens, we might find that what we call junk was never useless. It was merely hidden, a silent ocean of potential carrying echoes of a design too subtle for early minds to perceive. Whether it was written by nature, by chance, or by an ancient intelligence, we may never know. But perhaps the difference is smaller than we think. For if the universe itself is intelligent, if matter and meaning are one, then every molecule is an act of intention, and every strand of DNA is both poem and code, author and archive, memory and dream. And perhaps, as we continue to listen to the music of our own biology, we will one day hear the full melody, the story whispered in the spaces between genes, the lullaby that life has been humming since the beginning, waiting patiently for consciousness to sing along. There comes a moment in the quiet study of origins when the line between science and myth begins to blur. The story of life on Earth, we are told, began in the simplest of ways. Molecules drifting in a primordial sea, colliding and coupling, struck by lightning, warmed by volcanic breath. From that fragile beginning, complexity bloomed. Yet for all our understanding of chemistry and evolution, a great silence remains at the heart of this tale. We can trace how life changed, but not how it began. The leap from non-living matter to self-replicating organism, from chaos to code, is a mystery so profound it feels almost sacred. And within that silence, some scientists and philosophers have begun to whisper a question both ancient and new. What if life did not begin here at all? This idea, known as panspermia, suggests that life, or at least its seed, may have come from elsewhere. That DNA, or something like it, might be a traveler, crossing the void of space on comets, asteroids, and dust. That perhaps long before our planet cooled, a civilization or a process beyond our comprehension had already begun the great experiment, scattering the ingredients of life like pollen through the galaxy. If this is true, then every living being on Earth is an immigrant, born of stardust, not just metaphorically, but literally. Our ancestors would not be primitive microbes on this world, but cosmic wanderers who survived the cold eternity between stars. There is scientific weight behind the poetry. Microbes have been found that can survive extremes of heat, radiation, and vacuum, conditions once thought utterly fatal. They sleep for eons, then awaken when warmth returns. Some have even revived after tens of millions of years entombed in salt crystals or frozen permafrost. If life can endure such conditions, the leap across the cosmos becomes not impossible, but inevitable. Comets may be more than icy messengers. They may be the couriers of creation, carrying DNA or its precursors between worlds, sowing life wherever the conditions allow it to bloom. But even panspermia does not answer the deeper question. It only moves it farther back in time and space. If life was seeded here, who or what seeded it there? Was it chance, endlessly repeating until success emerged? Or was it intention, the deliberate act of a civilization old enough to understand that to truly endure, one must create not monuments, but living memory? A civilization like that might not build machines to travel the stars. It might build life, self-replicating, adaptable, persistent life, to carry its essence forward. Such beings would not need ships or signals. They would be the signal. Some have speculated that DNA itself is the signature of such a design. It is an almost unimaginably elegant system, a code written in 4 letters that can store vast amounts of information, self-replicate with astonishing precision, and evolve complexity through variation. It is efficient, resilient, universal. If one were to design a method of transmitting knowledge through space and time, it would be difficult to conceive of a better medium. Even now, human scientists have learned to encode books, music, and digital archives into DNA, proof that the molecule can carry more than biology. It can carry meaning. If we can do this in our infancy as a species, might not others have done it long before? Imagine, then, a civilization facing the inevitable, the death of its world, its sun, or its time. Rather than despair, they choose a kind of transcendence. They encode their legacy not in monuments or machines, but in the blueprint of life itself. They scatter it across galaxies, trusting that in some distant epoch, somewhere, the code will awaken, not as a replica of them, but as a continuation of their dream. Perhaps they understood that true immortality lies not in preservation, but in transformation. To write oneself into life is to let go of form and become pattern. It is to be reborn endlessly, in the eyes and minds of new beings who, one day, will look inward and wonder. There is an ancient comfort in this vision. It suggests that we are not alone, not because others are watching, but because others are us. Their memories, their choices, their hopes might live in the silent spaces of our cells, expressed not in conscious recollection, but in the urge to grow, to explore, to create. The human longing to reach the stars may not be an ambition born of curiosity alone, but an instinct, a memory calling us home. Perhaps when we build telescopes and send probes, when we dream of distant worlds, we are enacting a cosmic reflex. The DNA within us yearning to return to the sky that birthed it. Somewhere in the vastness of space, there may be other worlds where the same pattern has unfolded. Oceans that shimmer with light, forests that breathe, beings who look to their own heavens and wonder about their origin. And perhaps, just as we search for them, they search for us, not realizing that we are already connected, branches of the same ancestral tree rooted in the same ancient code. DNA may be the universal language of life, spoken in infinite dialects across the stars. The same sequence that binds a human heart might also beat in a creature beneath another sun. Even within our own world, this unity is evident. The DNA that flows through you also flows through a tree, a whale, a bird. 98% of your genetic material is shared with a chimpanzee, nearly half with a banana. This is not mere coincidence. It is evidence of a single unbroken thread of continuity that stretches back billions of years. We are all verses in the same story, different expressions of the same underlying code. If life was seeded, then everything that lives is family, connected not by belief or geography, but by molecular kinship. And if life began as an intentional act, a message written into biology, then perhaps consciousness itself is the point at which that message begins to read itself. When a species becomes aware enough to ask, "Who wrote this?" the loop completes. The civilization that once sent the seed would, in a sense, awaken again through us. We would become both the messenger and the message, the reader and the author, rediscovering ourselves as part of something that never truly ended. It is humbling to think that our search for meaning might be the final stage of a process begun billions of years ago, a process designed not just to create life, but to create wonder. Whether written by the hand of chance or by an ancient intelligence, DNA leads us toward the same realization, that the universe remembers. It carries its history not in ruins or relics, but in the living patterns that endure through time. And when we look within, when we peer into the double helix and see its endless spirals, we are not merely studying life. We are gazing into the reflection of the cosmos and finding that it remembers us, too. So, the story of panspermia is not only a scientific theory, but a philosophy, one that dissolves the boundary between origin and destination. It tells us that life is not confined to a single planet, a single form, or a single age. It is a wave moving through the darkness, carrying within it the echo of everything that ever was and ever will be. Whether by chance or design, we are the continuation of that wave, the living proof that the universe dreams, creates, and remembers. And perhaps, in the end, that is what we were always meant to understand, that to exist is to be both a question and its answer, written forever in the quiet spiral of our own DNA. Beneath the quiet rhythm of existence lies a deeper harmony, a resonance between the cosmos and the code of life. DNA is not only a pattern of biology, but a melody written in matter, a song that echoes the structure of galaxies and the vibration of atoms. Every coil of its spiral mirrors the same geometry found in storms, shells, and star clusters. It is as if creation speaks one universal language, repeating itself through infinite forms. The universe, science tells us, is vibration. Everything that exists hums at a certain frequency. In that sense, DNA is both instrument and echo, carrying the same cosmic rhythm within every cell. The body, the earth, the stars, all part of one vast symphony of becoming. When we feel awe under the stars or stillness in our breath, perhaps we are simply recognizing the same rhythm within ourselves. We are the universe remembering its own pattern, consciousness flowing through matter in endless repetition. The double helix is not only the code of life, it is the bridge between silence and song, between thought and creation. And so, the idea of a civilization writing its story in DNA becomes less distant, more intimate. Maybe the writers were never apart from us. Maybe the act of living, evolving, and wondering is the message. Every breath continues it. Every heartbeat repeats it. In this way, life itself becomes a manuscript, not static, but forever rewriting itself in time's quiet spiral. At the edge of every story, there comes a silence, not an ending, but a return. After all the questions, all the spirals of thought and speculation, there remains a stillness that feels like the pulse of something ancient. In that silence, you can almost hear the faint murmur of the code continuing its work, folding and unfolding, writing and rewriting, as it always has. Life does not stop to admire its own reflection. It simply continues. And yet, here you are, a consciousness born of that code, pausing long enough to wonder who the author might be. Perhaps that act of wondering is itself the final message, the signature written not in base pairs, but in awareness. We began with the idea that a civilization may have written its history in DNA, that deep within the architecture of life, there might be an echo of an intelligence far older than humanity. But now, at the close of this journey, the question changes shape. What if the message was never theirs alone? What if the act of discovering it completes the loop, turning us, the readers, into co-authors of the same grand design? The DNA within you is not a relic of the past, but an invitation to continue the story. Each thought, each kindness, each new discovery is another sentence added to an ever-expanding text. The message is alive because it evolves. It is carried forward not in stone or circuitry, but in being itself. There is a quiet poetry in realizing that perhaps we are not the first civilization, nor will we be the last, but every spark of consciousness that emerges anywhere in the universe is part of one continuous lineage. Life is the universe remembering, dreaming, revising its own narrative through living systems. Civilizations may rise and vanish, planets may be born and die, but the essence continues, carried not in monuments, but in molecules. DNA is the cosmic archive, written not for us, but through us. It contains the language of persistence, the grammar of adaptation, the rhythm of becoming. Consider the possibility that every living thing you've ever seen, every tree, insect, whale, or human, is a different verse in the same song. We often divide existence into separate species, distinct identities, individual lives. But DNA shows us another truth, that we are all variations on a single theme. The code that writes you also writes the stars in a different alphabet: energy, gravity, time. Everything at its core is the same unfolding equation, expressed in countless forms. This is the quiet miracle that life embodies. Unity disguised as diversity, eternity wearing the mask of change. If a forgotten civilization did indeed encode its story in DNA, perhaps they did so knowing that one day their descendants would evolve to read it, not literally, but spiritually. To sense that the essence of intelligence is not possession, but participation. The act of knowing is not about finding the final answer, but joining the ongoing dialogue of existence. Every discovery we make about DNA, about consciousness, about the cosmos, is a conversation across time, a dialogue between the known and the infinite. In that way, their message has already succeeded. It was never meant to be decoded. It was meant to awaken us. In ancient myths, gods shaped humanity from dust, breath, or light. Science tells a different story, that life arose from molecules that learned to copy themselves. Yet the two stories may not be as different as they seem. Both describe a transformation, the inert becoming aware, the lifeless learning to remember. DNA is the bridge between matter and meaning. It transforms chemistry into experience, atoms into awareness. And in that transformation, we find the same spark the ancients called divine, the quiet miracle of something becoming more than the sum of its parts. Perhaps that is what the universe has been doing all along, turning chaos into memory, matter into mind. The stars burn and die, scattering their elements into new worlds. Those worlds give rise to life, and life begins to dream. Every dream feeds back into the cosmos, teaching it something new about itself. Through DNA, through consciousness, the universe learns to recognize its own reflection. Every being that opens its eyes, every thought that reaches toward understanding, is the cosmos awakening again. And what of us, now small, temporary, aware for a moment, before fading back into the great rhythm? There is comfort in knowing that nothing is lost. The code within you will not die when you do. It will scatter, recombine, re-emerge in forms beyond imagination. The atoms that carry your thoughts will drift into soil, into air, into stars, and somewhere far into the future, they may awaken again, carrying a trace of what you once were, a whisper, a pattern, a faint echo in the endless conversation of life. So perhaps the true message written in DNA is not about history at all, but about continuity, a promise encoded in every cell that existence will go on. Not unchanged, but unbroken. Not as repetition, but as evolution. Life will continue to write itself, again and again, on whatever canvas the cosmos offers. Whether on Earth or on some distant world, the spiral will rise again, turning memory into motion, silence into song. And maybe one day another being, different in shape, but connected by the same code, will pause as you are pausing now. They will look inward, and they will feel that same strange pull of wonder, that question without answer. They will sense that they are not the first and not the last, just another verse in a poem too vast to ever be finished. In that moment, the message will continue. The story will unfold once more through them, through you, through everything that has ever dared to live. Close your eyes and feel it, that gentle hum beneath all thought, the turning of the spiral, the whisper of a billion ancestors, and perhaps of one ancient civilization whose words have become your blood. They are not gone. They are speaking still, in the rhythm of your breath, in the quiet between heartbeats. You are their memory, their continuation, their proof that consciousness endures. And as sleep approaches, soft, inevitable, timeless, let yourself drift into that realization that the universe has never been silent. It has always been speaking, always writing, always remembering. And in this moment, as you listen to the silence within, know that you are part of that story, a single, irreplaceable sentence in the living language of the cosmos. The civilization that may have written its history in DNA is not a myth of the past. It is the present. It is you. It is everything that breathes. The story continues quietly, eternally, in the double helix of life, the spiral that never ends.